Welcome back. This is Revit 2023. Now, I'm going to show you all of this completely out of the box, like I said. This is what you're presented every time you open up Revit. You'll see these models, which will be recent files. They've got some example ones here, some example different families. I'll explain all of these in detail. But for the most part, I don't generally ever use the recent files panel. It's risky to open up these things if you're working with anybody else on a project, because they could be opening up a newer version and you could be opening up the version that's saved on your desktop. And generally, that's just not good practice, a bit risky. So over here we have models. Models are another name for projects. It's basically, where your buildings are going to be. In families, we have basically everything that goes inside Revit. So any 2D family, 3D family, annotation, system families. I'll explain these all in more detail. And then down here we have Autodesk Docs. Autodesk Docs is the cloud solution that Autodesk has created. It's very powerful, it's very useful, but that's a whole tutorial on its own. So first off, we're just going to jump straight in and go New. I'm going to click on the architectural template, and we'll build a template later, but for now, we'll just start a new project. Right off the bat, we have Autodesk 2023, Project 1. That's the default name that we're given. When we rename our project, we'll see the name up there, and then we'll also see the view that's currently open. We have the view that we have open right now as a tab, and a bunch of views will propagate this area here as more tabs, and then the view that we have open as well is also highlighted here in bold in the project browser. The project browser probably makes sense that that's where all the different views that you're going to find, as well as all the families, which is all the content that we have, and the groups and links. The properties panel is incredibly useful. It shows us all the specific information that either the view that we have open or the element that we have selected. So all of this information here, I'm actually just going to drag this panel out. So first and foremost, let's learn how to reorganize this whole interface. So the properties browser, I'm going to grab this panel, drag it out here, and then I'm going to grab it again, and I'm just going to hover over this edge here. This is where Revit is really specific with where exactly your mouse is. This is a little bit finicky, so you got to be really slow and careful when you're moving your mouse. It deselected there. Let's just put it right there, and then we'll add it to that browser there. We can put this wherever, but this is how I like to have Revit set up. I generally leave this quite large, and yes, I have less drawing space, but this is really useful. Now, overall, we have this thing called the ribbon. This is where all our different tools and commands are going to be. And when you click on something, the ribbon changes. It opens up this Modify tab that will show us different interactions and different things that we can use. Different panels will show up based on the different things, if it's a line or if it's a sketch. This is where all of that information is going to be. So keep an eye out. This is a cheeky place that really useful stuff happens. Also, incredibly importantly, down in the bottom left corner here, we have this click to select line of text over here. When I hover over something, that line down there changes. It shows me a highlight of what I'm about to potentially click on. Same with the tooltip that you just saw pop up in white there. That also shows up, and this can be useful for a couple different times. So sometimes if you're not quite sure what you're doing, what you're clicking on, that's a really useful way to find it. Now if I click on something, I get this other bit of information down here. This is the filter, but more importantly, this little number down in the corner shows me how many elements I have selected. So if I select a couple, it'll show me that I've got 2 elements. If I click on this filter, or up here click on this filter, it'll show me the different categories and the count, the amount of items that I have selected. And I can use this, and it's really powerful. Now when it comes to selecting, when I hover my mouse over top of something, it'll highlight in blue. Highlighting in blue will show me what I'm about to select. If I tab, hitting the tab key, and the tab key is incredibly useful. If I hit the tab key, it'll cycle through the different options of things that I could possibly select. So now if I click, I've selected that item. The properties panel has changed. It's showing me a whole bunch of very unique information to this specific element. I have one thing selected down here, and now I want to deselect. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. Generally in Revit, there's a lot of different ways of doing things. So if I want to deselect, I can click in the white space. This is a really easy way to do this. I can click, so long as I'm not over top of another element or thing, then it will deselect. If I select this element and I hit the escape key, I will also deselect. If I click on this, I hit this modify button, I will also deselect. And one final way, potentially more, but one final way is right-clicking and clicking cancel. If I select a tool, right now I've selected the wall tool, and I hit escape, it will cancel the tool that I'm in. Sometimes you'll have to hit escape 2 or 3 times to get out of the different layers of tool that you're in, so best to double tap. Now, if I also want to restart the last tool that I had selected, I can hit the enter key. This now shows me that I'm using the wall tool. Like I said before, the modify tab changes when I have different tools selected. So here I've got a whole bunch of different things that'll define the way that this wall is built when I draw it. Let's say I select one element, but I want to add another thing to my selection. I'm going to hold the Control key and click on another thing. Unlike a lot of programs, Shift is not the way to add. Shift is actually the way that you deselect. So if I hold Shift and click on this, it'll deselect that. If I hold Control and click, I've got 3 elements selected right now. Now, since they're all the same type, I'm going to see the same information here, or similar information here. If I hold Control and add another type of element, it's going to say multiple families are selected. This means that there aren't any common aspects to these different elements, and I can't modify anything that is consistent between them. If I hold the Shift key and deselect that guy, and let's just say I change this hide scales at coarser than, and I change this to 1000. Now if I add another element that's similar to these ones, but has a different variable for that field, it's going to say varies. I can change this all at once back to something that it was before, and now it has accepted that, and they're all the same. So I'm going to hit escape and deselect everything. All right, now cross select and box select are 2 very useful ways of selecting different things. Now if I drag from left to right, I will be using the box select. Now this will select only the elements that I have completely encompassed within this box. So you can see as it comes across here, it catches the head, and then it catches the body, the rest of the elevation element. When I let go of my mouse button, it selected these elements. If I hold Control, I can select the rest of these guys. Now if I use the cross select, and it's important to know that when I click again, it's basically doing that deselection because I'm clicking in white space and I'm not holding any other keys. So if I click and drag from right to left, it will grab anything that this box touches. You can see as that's coming through. Just as soon as that comes through and starts touching it, I've grabbed 4 different elements. If I click the filter, I've got elevations and I've got views. Something that a lot of new people aren't very comfortable with because it is a 3D program and there's a lot of depth of information. It's really important to know what you're doing when you're clicking and you're dragging and you're doing stuff. Because if I hover over an element and I click and I start to drag, I'm going to be dragging that element around. Right now I'm dragging around the crop view or the cut view of that elevation. If it's showing me this highlight of what I'm about to do, but if I don't want to continue and I don't want to continue moving the thing that I've clicked and started dragging, I can just hit the escape key. That'll cancel the action that I've started and avoid making mistakes. If I don't want to be doing that and I want to be a little bit safer, I can come down here and I can untick this box. I can turn off drag elements on selection. Now that I have this selected, when I click on an element and move my mouse, I'll just use the box select. Either or. It means that I'm not going to accidentally move things around unless I've already selected it, and then I can drag it around. So if I hit escape, I'm not going to move it because that action hasn't been completed. I'm going to leave it on because I've been using Revit for a while. Let's say I did end up moving something. I dragged it over here. I want to hit undo. I'm going to use Control Z, Control Z, and it's going to undo that action. If I want to redo that action, Control Y, like most programs, will redo that. Now, if I drag this over here and I use the move command and I move it down here, if I wanted to undo systematically the different actions that I've just taken, there's a little down arrow beside the undo and subsequently the redo, but the down arrow beside that will show me the different actions that I'm going to choose to undo. So if I want to undo the first drag that I did, I can click on that and it's going to put the element back right where I wanted. This is really useful if you don't have this element deselected. And I'm working around things and I click over here and I drag stuff and I go, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I just did something. Did I drag something? I can come over here and go, oh, okay, I dragged. Now, we can undo that. We're safe. You haven't made a mess of a project. Fantastic. Now let's say I want to move something and I just want to move it a little bit. The arrow keys, the D-pad, this is really common. Most drafting 3D programs have a nudge function, and in Revit it works largely the same way. If I just hit the down arrow a bunch of times, it's going to nudge it down. If I hold the shift and I hit the down arrow, it's going to move it further. Now it also moves it based on how close you've zoomed in or zoomed out of the element. So if I zoom in here and I hit the down arrow, it's basically moving a similar amount on screen as if I zoom far out and I hit that down arrow. So you can see it's really jumping through that space. And if I zoom in again and I hit the left, it's only moving so much. But if I hit the shift, it's going to do that larger jump. Let's say I didn't want to do all of that. I can come all the way down here and undo all of those nudges. So 2D navigation, you probably saw the whole thing shift over. I hit the middle mouse button, and the middle mouse button with a mouse is the most powerful thing that you're going to have when it comes to navigating a project in Revit. It's just so completely useful. So you push down on the middle mouse button, it gives you this icon that is showing you that you're panning right now, and you're moving that whole 2D view around on a 2D plane. If I zoom in, it's going to zoom in where my mouse is. So if I zoom in, it's going to come in over here. If I zoom in with my mouse over here, it's going to zoom in over there. This is also a way that you can navigate. I don't recommend solely relying on this because it's a bit on the finicky side and a bit on the slower side. Panning is really useful, but it's up to you. Now, if I have zoomed in really far or zoomed out really far, and I want to do a zoom extents, there's a bunch of keyboard commands. You can look those up and figure those out. But one of the most useful things is if I double click the middle mouse button, it'll do that zoom extents. It'll zoom so that I see all of the different content on my screen at the same time. You can also right click to do different zoom functions. So if I am zoomed in on this guy and I click zoom to fit, it'll fit all of the information on the screen the same way the middle mouse button does with a double click. If I right click and zoom in region, you can also pick a certain amount of information that you want to see specifically. You can zoom out. It's useful, but I generally quickly navigate by the middle mouse button or double clicking. Let me show you some 3D navigation. I'm just really going to quickly model up a floor. Let's just put something down here. I'll get into explaining all of this in detail a bit later. Let's put some walls on so that we can see what's going on. And then we're going to click and place a door. Now again, like I said, where your mouse is really important. So depending on which side of the wall is, where your mouse is where different things are going to be. But I haven't even started explaining doors yet. All right, I'm going to hit this house button up here. This is also a quick access toolbar to use a bunch of the functions that are really useful. So click this home button. I'm going to hold shift and use the middle mouse button again, just like we had before. And I'm going to rotate this around so that we can see the door that we had placed on the left side of the awkward structure that we've created. Again, if I double click the middle mouse button without moving it, because if I click and drag, it's not part of the sequence that we've tried to do before. But if I double click the middle mouse button without moving my mouse, it'll zoom extents. Now, I want to show you 3D orbit navigation. And this is really important because I've seen a lot of people move the building, move the view, and it just skits off into nowhere. And that's really difficult when you don't understand why it's doing that. So let me show you. If I click on this element here, and I hold the Shift button key, and I click the middle mouse button, I'm in the orbit mode. And when you can see that this is orbiting right around the object that I have selected. Now if I deselect that and I come over here and I'm looking down in this corner over here and I'm exploring things and I hold the Shift key and I start to orbit, it doesn't orbit around what I'm looking at or where my mouse was selected like SketchUp does. It's still orbiting where that element was that I last selected. So it's good to keep in mind where your orbit point is when you're navigating a 3D model. All right, so we've got a 3D view open here. This has opened up a new view as a new tab as our level 0. So we can click back and forth between these, but if we want to open up a new view, we can double click on one of these or one of these or one of these. Or we can click on the elevation head and open up this view. Now all of these show their different names of the different list here. If I hit Control and the tab, then as I tab through, holding Control, as I tab through these, it's going to go from left to right. If I hold Control Shift and then click Tab, then it's going to go right to left. But I don't find this particularly useful. Back in the day, it wasn't like this. They added this as a feature, which I thought was interesting, but I didn't like it. So if we click on File, go Options, and then go User Interface, I'm going to come down here to this Control and Shift tab. I'm going to change this to History Order because this is way more useful. Just going to click OK. And now if I go to level 0 and I come over to this west elevation, and then I go over to level 1, if I'm working in level 1 and I hit Control Tab, it's going to jump straight over to the last view that I had open. And then if I hit it again, it'll be the last view before that, which is level 0. If I hold Control Shift and then click Tab, it's going to do the opposite in the order that I had selected views open, which is more useful because if I'm opening up different things and navigating between two different views, the Control, Shift, and Tab functions are really, really useful for being able to get around a model very quickly. That's pretty much it for what I've started with. I'm not going to save this because this is me just throwing some things together to explain some stuff. But what I am going to show you is that this layout that we've created with the project browser and the properties, this is going to be saved as soon as we close down the project. Now, if I want to quickly close out all of these other views that I have opened, this button up here, Close Inactive Views, is really useful because you can have multiple different projects open. And if you click that, it'll only leave one view open, which was the last view you had open, as different tabs inside this space here. And then if I click on this last one, it's going to close the project completely. And it's going to ask me if I want to save this file. I'm not going to because there's not much inside here. I haven't really dug into actually building anything specific. So for the most part, I'm just gonna close this one out, and I'm just gonna hit no. This brings me back to here, and if I close Revit completely and start it back up again, when Revit started, initially it had the panels over top of each other. When I start this one, you'll see, going to go File, New, Architectural Template, click OK. You can see that when this opens, it uses the same user interface that I had last set up. All right, that's enough for the user interface. There's so much more to get into this program. So for now, I'm going to leave you with that, and I'll see you later. Thanks for watching.